The house looked like a postcard the night. It almost stopped feeling like a home. Candles trembled in their silver cups. The mantel glowed with a neat row of stockings, and a choir of soft lights twined through cedar boughs above the dining room arch. My sister had staged everything with the kind of care you only give to something you want people to believe. Perfect plates, embroidered napkins, tiny place cards written in looping gold ink. The ham shone with honeyed glaze. The turkey rested under a tint of steam, and cinnamon rode the air from a parade of pies cooling on the counter. Everyone laughed the loud, generous laugh of people who want the evening, and themselves, to appear larger than their shadows. I lifted my glass to join them, felt the fizz tickle my lip, and then a small hand tugged at my sleeve. My niece leaned in so close her breath touched my ear. "Don't drink," she whispered, voice shaking like a leaf still clinging to a winter tree. "You'll die. If you're already leaning forward, take a breath with me. And hey, if you enjoy stories like this, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one." Today's shout out goes to Rebecca from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for listening. Drop your name and where you're watching from in the comments for a chance at a shout out in the next story. Now, back to what happened the moment that whisper cracked Christmas. I turned, expecting a prank, a grin, anything to let the blood return to my face. But my niece's eyes were too wide, too steady. She didn't blink. Her fingers tightened on my sleeve as if she feared the moment I slipped free from her touch, I'd slip from the world altogether. I looked down at the glass in my hand, golden, bubbling, the sort of innocent sparkle that makes you forget how fast a night can turn. Around the table, hands hovered, waiting for me to lift mine so the chorus of toasts could begin. My sister's smile stretched bright, festive, and brief. For the smallest second, her gaze snagged on my glass with a meaning I couldn't name and then skittered away. Instinct overrode ceremony. I laughed at some half-heard joke, set my glass down, and, in a movement smooth enough to look clumsy, slid it in front of my brother-in-law while drawing his toward me. The table's chatter swelled. No one seemed to notice. My niece's grip eased a fraction. I almost let myself breathe. He raised the glass. "Wait." The word ripped out of my sister like fabric tearing. Her chair screeched back. She lunged, smacking the crystal from his hand so hard it burst against the table's edge. Champagne sprayed the tablecloth in a glittering arc. The room fell into a vacuum of silence, broken only by the soft, horrible chime of glass finishing its fall. My brother-in-law stared at his dripping sleeve. "Evelyn," he said, soft, stunned, using her name like a question. There was a crack," she blurted, already blotting at the mess with a pristine napkin that immediately turned into a flag of surrender. "You could have cut yourself." No one moved. No one lifted a glass. Children, who moments earlier had been negotiating for extra rolls, froze. The turkey steamed alone. My niece pressed closer to me, small shoulder beneath my palm, heartbeat a rabbit's drum. Across the table, my sister would not look at me. She dabbed and dabbed at the spill as though hard enough dabbing could erase the word she'd spit and the terror that had driven it out. "Mom," my niece breathed, so soft I almost thought I'd imagined it. But my sister heard. Something in her jaw tightened, then loosened, like a hinge that had given way beneath weight. It's strange, the way suspicion lands. It doesn't crash. It settles, like ash after a fire that hasn't yet admitted it's burning. Faces shifted. My mother's mouth flattened. My brother shook his head once, warning or disbelief. I couldn't tell. The holiday playlist, oblivious, let a bell and string arrangement sigh into the edges of the room. I stood first. "Let me help." I started to gather the shards, but my sister's hand flashed out. "No, I've got it." The words were gentle. The eyes were not. She's always been like that, silk speech, steel underneath. I left the shards, folded a napkin carefully, and sat. No one toasted. The moment had been blown out like a candle you don't dare relight, because you're not sure the wick is what it was before. I turned my head an inch. "Lila," I said to my niece, equally soft. What did you hear? Her eyes flicked to her mother, then back to me. She swallowed. The swallowing looked like it hurt. In the kitchen, she whispered. Auntie said, she said to put it in only one. She said, he always chooses his seat last. Her little jaw trembled. She thought it would be you. Only one. The phrase hung in my mind with the cold weight of a key you don't want to try in any lock. I pressed her hand, then slid my chair back with a scrape. I didn't mean to be loud. I carried my napkin to the kitchen like it was something that needed disposing, and maybe it was. A scrap of the night's former innocence. The kitchen was too clean, staged, set, gleaming. 2 empty flutes stood near the sink, drying in their own faint halo of steam. The dish soap sat sentinel, the sponge looking unused. On the far counter, a small saucer bore a crescent of something clear that had dried to a thin skin. I leaned in. No sin I could name, but there was a bitterness in the air that didn't belong to cider or cloves. A second saucer, clean. A third, still wet, turned upside down, as if someone had hurriedly rinsed, then thought better of leaving it in the drying rack and flipped it to hide its inside from view. I did not touch it, not with my hands. I took the long way back to the dining room, passing through the hall where family photos lined the wall. The story of our lives in frames. My sister and I as kids, clinging to a swing. Her graduation, my first apartment, our parents on a beach they couldn't afford but found a way to visit anyway. In one frame, my sister's wedding day, her smile bright as a promise you believe because you need to. In another, my niece, newborn, cheeks like warm bread, eyes already trying to understand the world she'd been given. I sat. The chair felt colder than it had a minute before. Mark, I said to my brother-in-law, you okay? He blinked as if waking. Yeah, just, he looked at his sleeve. It's fine. Let's eat. My sister chirped, voice pitched too high, like a violin string you know will snap if you bow it as hard as you want to. She lifted the carving knife and set into the turkey. The blade squeaked once against bone. The sound made Lila flinch. We served ourselves. Forks scratched plates in a slow, careful rhythm. The conversation returned in a trickle, weather, gifts, a cousin's new job. It all sounded like people doing impressions of themselves. I chewed and tasted nothing. There are 2 kinds of memories, the ones you invite, like guests you want, and the ones that let themselves in. The latter came unasked. My sister's sudden fury the year I refused to co-sign a loan I couldn't afford. The way she'd smiled too brightly when our fathers will named me executor. The offhand barbs. You've always thought you knew best. That cut deeper than they looked. Love can carry an awful lot of denial before it collapses under its own weight. I'm going to make coffee, I said, pushing back from the table. Anyone? A chorus of no, thanks that felt like relief. My sister nodded too quickly. I'll do it, she said. I insist, I replied, already standing. Our eyes met. There it was, a flicker. Fear, yes, but something else. Calculation? Resentment? Fate fixing its hair in a mirror and deciding on an expression? In the kitchen, I set water to boil though the machine didn't need it. I just wanted the sound. I opened and shut a few cabinets with the slowness of a man who has lived in this house long enough to know where things are and the right to touch them. In the quiet, Lila's whisper touched my ear again, as present as breath. Don't drink. The living room took on the hush of a chapel after the recessional. Everyone's still there, no one sure what they'd just witnessed or what it meant about the vows they believed in. From the doorway, I watched my sister pour something into the trash, clear, from a small glass bottle I recognized not at all. She caught herself, set the bottle into a pocket of her apron, and turned with a smile pinned too carefully to her face. You always overboil, she teased, as if we'd stepped back into our roles from 1,000 simpler dinners. Better than under. I lifted the lid off the trash with a finger curled in the napkin I still held, letting the steam from the kettle fog the air between us. In the bin, under a fan of paper towels, an empty ribbon of cellophane clung to the curve of an orange peel. I lowered the lid. You always did like to be in control, I said lightly. Someone has to be. She squared her shoulders. This house doesn't host itself. No, I said. It doesn't. We looked at each other with the kind of nakedness you avoid most of your life because you're afraid of what you'll see. I saw the girl who used to steal my socks to make hand puppets when the power went out. I also saw the woman capable of lunging at her husband to stop a sip. Why did you scream? I asked at last, quietly. There wasn't a crack in that glass. Her mouth opened, closed. When she spoke, she chose disdain. You're being dramatic. It's Christmas, for God's sake. It is, I agreed. Which is why you're lucky I switched the glasses before you remembered to fear the wrong person. The smile dropped. The muscles in her cheek jumped like a heartbeat under skin. What do you want from me? She said. And there it was, the plea, dressed as a challenge. The truth, I said. Or at least a version of it that doesn't insult the child who warned me. Her eyes flicked, barely, toward the doorway. Lila's shadow slipped away from it like a fish into reeds. My sister inhaled. She misunderstood. What did she misunderstand? Everything. Say everything enough times, and it becomes nothing, I murmured. You know that trick? You taught it to me. She moved past me to the sink, ran water, rinsed a spotless cup. She liked the performance of this, cleaning what didn't need cleaning. You've made it clear you don't trust me, she said, voice cool again. So don't. Sit there, watch me rinse air, and decide that means something. That's what you do, assign meaning. Write stories. Make villains. It would have been easier to fight if she'd shouted. The calm was what made me cold. I set the kettle aside. If I had drunk, I said, quiet, what would have happened? She didn't answer. We stood with the question between us like a fragile thing you don't touch for fear it will reveal itself by breaking. Back at the table, the food had given up its heat. My mother rose, suggested we open presents to warm the mood. Wrapping paper rustled like dry leaves. Children remembered they were children. Delight returned in pockets and whirls. My brother found a joke and threw it into the center like a rope. We all grabbed at it, even if only with eyes. I watched my sister watch the room. She laughed in the right places, kissed the top of her husband's head, helped the kids untie stubborn knots. Another person might have missed the degree of effort it took for her to keep every thread in her hands. But I knew her stitches. Later, when the tree had a skirt of torn paper and the playlist had looped twice, people drifted to couches and corners. I found Lila in the hallway, tracing the frame of a family photo with one finger. You did good, I said. You were brave. She'll be mad, she whispered. Maybe, I said. But being mad isn't the same as being right. She nodded like children do when they want to believe you can carry the weight you've promised to carry. I heard her on the phone, she added, voice even smaller. She said, tonight, and he won't make it to morning. And then she cried like she cries in the bathroom when she thinks no one can hear. The hall's small lamp hummed. The house made its winter settling ticks. Thank you, I said. If you're scared, you come find me. No matter what. Understood. She nodded again, and, with that unguarded trust that made my chest ache, she hugged me. Quickly, fiercely, then ran back toward the tree when someone called her name. I stood alone with the pictures, looking at ghosts of us that hadn't known yet which way we were going to bend. I went upstairs briefly, more to breathe than to fetch anything, but I fetched something anyway. A small black notebook I keep because I forget things when nights turn crowded. I wrote, Lila's whisper. Switch. Evelyn's scream. Kitchen, bottle. Trash, cellophane. Saucer, film. It felt clinical, and maybe that was a mercy. Facts are a handrail when the stairs go dark. When I came down, I passed the little camera I'd installed over the back door after a rash of neighborhood break-ins last spring. Its LED winked. Funny how you put devices in to protect against strangers and then find yourself wondering what they might see when the danger comes from a familiar face wearing your family's smile. My phone vibrated with a message from my lawyer, a holiday check-in I hadn't expected. Merry Christmas Eve. Papers are ready after the holiday. We'd been finalizing a small trust for Lila, something separate from the family's noisier funds. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. Maybe I'd always known where the fault line lay. Maybe I'd voted not to feel it. When it was late enough for yawns to be an excuse, people gathered coats. My brother-in-law stood, slid one arm into his, and paused to stare at the cuff that had dried stiff with champagne. "Evelyn," he murmured, the question this time quieter and aimed where it belonged. She smiled without showing teeth. "You know I'm careful. That glass was compromised." He nodded slowly. The nod said, "I don't know which of us I'm believing right now." The nod said, "I want to choose you because I promised to." The nod said, "I'm listening for the sound of the ground under me." At the door, goodnights felt like hellos from a country I wasn't sure we'd all return to. My sister hugged me, the choreography of it perfect, the temperature of it not. "Drive safe," she said, as if safety were a thing you could wrap around a person like a scarf. Her fingers pressed the back of my coat a heartbeat too long. "We'll talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I agreed, and heard how the word could carry two meanings: the day after this one, or a place some of us never reach. After they left, the house exhaled. I went back to the table and found my original place setting, the ghost ring of a glass that had sat there and been moved and made all the difference. I lifted the napkin I'd used to shield my hand and eased a small triangle of glass into it, a piece from the smashed flute that had almost met my brother-in-law's mouth. Evidence, or talisman, or both. In the kitchen, the trash had been emptied. The bin shone too bright. I opened the cabinet beneath the sink and found a new liner already tucked in, square as a promise of cleanliness. The absence left a shape, and the shape told its own story. I closed it gently. I made coffee I didn't intend to drink and watched it steam. Then I sat at the table with my notebook and wrote a final line for the night. Tomorrow at noon, talk. Before that, door camera. Call Martin Lab. Call Mom. It was mundane, listed like errands, and that mundanity steadied me. I can't tell you what was in that glass without lying or guessing, and I won't do either. I can tell you what I saw: a child brave enough to speak, a woman terrified by the consequence of the switch, a family trying to pretend a song can keep the walls from hearing. When the house had settled fully and the tree lights ticked softly in their own private language, I walked to the back door and glanced up at the camera once more. "Did you see?" I asked it, absurdly, as if a lens might give me absolution as well as proof. The LED answered as it always does. Blink, blink, neither yes nor no. Only, I was here. I turned off the dining room lights last. The table lay like a landscape after weather. Shimmer of spill, drift of crumbs, a valley where a glass had fallen and shattered. From the hall, the faces in the frames watched me, still smiling, unaware of the chapter that would be written below them. I touched my father's picture. "You'd tell me I'm being dramatic," I said. "And then you'd tell me to be careful anyway." Upstairs, my phone buzzed with a single new message. Unknown number. "We should talk before you do anything stupid." No punctuation. No greeting. That was the part that made me smile. The assumption that I'd panic. The assumption that I didn't already understand panic had never kept anyone safe, only quiet. I typed back, "Tomorrow. Noon. Here." Then I set the phone face down, slid the shard of glass deeper into the folded napkin, and placed both in the drawer where we keep birthday candles and matches, the drawer of beginnings and light. I lay awake longer than the house, listening to the wind tease the eaves, to the old wood answering creaks. Somewhere in that chorus, I heard my niece's whisper again, a thread of sound looping the night to the moment it had started to unravel. "Don't drink. You'll die." Morning would come, heavy with questions I'd ask, and some I wouldn't have to. But that night, I let the final thought be simple, steady, and as close to a prayer as I ever say. Thank you for the warning, child. Thank you for the pause that saved a life. And to the person who made the night shimmer with menace, thank you, in a way, too. Because now the show is over. Because you let your fear speak first. Because the house still stands, and I am still here. And there is a truth in this room that will not be wiped clean, no matter how many times you rinse a cup and call it nothing. By morning, the carols would sound different. By noon, someone would knock with a face arranged for innocence. And by dusk, this house might be a home again, or it might only be a place where light once pretended to mean warmth. Either way, tonight's lesson would remain. I switched the glass. She screamed. And the part of the story that matters is not the method or the word for what might have happened. It's the moment a little girl chose courage over fear, and a truth leapt out of the dark because it couldn't stand to wait any longer. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.